Hey everyone, welcome back to Riffs Cross Generation. I'm your host, Andrew, and I'm here with my co-host,
Eli.
and we are joined by maybe one of the main reasons I love technical music, and I got into aggressive technical music, and one of the bands I love from an early on part of being a teenager, here with guitarist, vocalist from Atheist, Neurotica, Till the Dirt, Kelly Shaefer. Welcome to the podcast.
How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Doing well.
Doing well.
So to introduce you to my co-host, this is my son Eli. He's going to turn 14 in a week. So, yeah.
Yeah.
14. Nice.
Yeah.
That was exactly the year I started playing guitar. So 14 was a really important year of musicality for me. So do you play as well?
Yeah,
You just
I
enjoy
play.
music. You play?
I play. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like a sponge right now to absorb music. So just remember,
Yeah.
practice. I spent a lot of time in that 14th and 15th year of my life in my bedroom. Just, there was no internet back then. So it was really easy to just, sort of shore up in your room and just play. And you've got everything available at your fingertips now with YouTube and all that. So you can literally, you can study hard and it'll never leave you, man. It's the greatest thing. What instrument do you play?
Guitar.
Guitar. Perfect. Yep, it'll never leave you. It'll always be by your side. Never lies to you. Gives you, gives you as much as, you know what I mean? It's a very truthful instrument. You have to put the time into it, but when you do, it's so rewarding, like through life, just to be able to grab a guitar. And it sucked for me because I was left-handed, so I didn't get to just grab anybody's guitar and play. It was a very right-handed world, and it still is.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, congratulations. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Yeah. So some history, Kelly. And first time I spoke to you, we talked a little bit before the podcast started here. Was in 1990, I believe it was, for my fanzine, Tin Bean fanzine, right after Atheist released their first album. Out of that interview, the thing I remember most is at the end of it, when I asked you if you had anything else to add, you said, "Thanks for not asking if all the members of the band were atheists." I think at the time, like Metal Blade had interviews set up for you one after another. And I think if memory serves me right, you were asked in every interview previous to me if you guys were all atheists.
It's always that question still pops up, and I just kind of look at people like, come on, man. I have some funny, rebuttals now. I say, obviously Dave Mustaine is not a serial killer. He does play in Megadeth, but he's not a serial killer. And the guys in Metallica are not made of metal.
And the guys at Cannibal Corpse aren't cannibals.
Nope.
No.
Sorry to say. Very normal guys. No, it's I guess it's an understandable thing. But nobody asked the Washington Redskins whether they were all Redskins. Were you guys all Native Americans? It's just, I don't know. I think of it as a journalist, you should probably, be a little sharper than that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Why do you think that was such a question, though, of all the things to ask?
Why do you think that they say that?
Yeah. Why do you think they asked you so many times?
Well, because it's such it's a, it's a denomination that clearly separates itself from the 85% of the country that has a particular belief in God. And I think a lot of people are just like, really? You're going to call your band that? Is everybody an atheist? All of a sudden, you have to be an atheist in order to play an atheist. Everybody just took it, I just happen to be, and I don't even know that I fall into a denomination. I'm just anti-organized thought. You know what I mean? I don't think that thought flourishes amongst the masses. I think smartness is very specific. There's certain people in history have come along. They're not a part of a movement. They're just one person. Dare I even say Elon Musk? Very weird guy, but very smart. A guy that's kind of moving, moving progress along. And so I've never been one to feel like I need to be on the side of the fence where everybody else is. I need everybody to agree with me, and I need to agree with them. I always liked being the other guy, the one guy on the other side of the fence. And nobody was able to ever, answer questions that I had about the Bible. And I read the Bible, and my mother made me go to, for 2 summers, I went to Sunday school, and, I heard what they had to say. So it's not like I stuck my head in the sand and pretended that it didn't matter. But, as I got older, it just became clearer and clearer to me that, my denomination leans way, way away from Catholic and Christianity and all the others. So I just always had a firm belief in myself. It's good enough for me. I get up and put my 2 feet on the floor, and I move through the day. That's, it's all the God I need. I'm just grateful for earth and trees and I'm really obviously, lyrically, I've always sort of explored nature themes. I'm just more impressed with the moon and the ocean and the fact that they line up and have tides. And I like science, I mean, things that you can explain. And I prefer that. And then I'm okay with not having an answer of what happens when I die. I like
Yeah.
to make up my own little things because none of us will ever have that experience of knowing what that'll be like or what it's like. So I like my story better than theirs.
Yeah, yeah. I guess over the years I've stuck with me, especially in a genre where God, 90% of the bands are anti-religious, so it was just struck me as weird. And before you were actually called Atheist, you were called Ravage, correct? And that was an acronym for like
Well, it started
raging.
off as Ravage. Then back then, you can understand this. Eli might be like but you did not want to sound like a hair band. You know what I mean? Like if you're put this new metal that we were all coming into this speed metal and all this shit that was going on, we were like very guarded with it. And so the last thing you want to do is be confused with like a band that sounds like Dokken. And so that's exactly what happened. There was another band that sounded like Dokken that was called Ravage, and we were like, shit.
Oh man.
We don't want to have to go through that. So, but we also had been Ravage for a minute at that point, I mean, and so I was like, what if we make it an acronym? And then it just became so long and silly that I just looked at, it was Raging Atheists Vowing a Gory End.
Yeah.
It's the
That's
worst
great.
name ever,
It just
Try
reminds me
shouting
of
that out for an encore in a concert, Raging Atheists Vowing a Gory End. Raging Atheists. I mean, so that didn't work. So I just dropped everything and just made it Atheist, and then that stuck.
Yeah, it just reminds me of something you'd hear from the leftovers of the Satanic Panic, where Kiss is night in Satan's service and things like that.
Yeah.
For those who don't know or weren't around back then, where Atheist was and still is and has led the way for entire genre of music. From at least my perspective, Atheist is the Rush of extreme music.
Bless your heart, my man. That's awesome.
I guess my question here is, how the hell did you find other musicians that wanted to play jazzy, thrashy, prog death metal?
Well, you have to understand that wasn't the outset sort of it, that it just materialized that way. That's what's so cool about musical movements is that you don't know when you're in it. All you know is that me and Steve Flynn, our drummer, we went to junior high together, and Roger Patterson lived in the city, like sort of next to us. So it was really me and Steve that started the band in the very, very beginning. Decided we were going to be a band, and then slowly pulled those guys in. And it was really just about this secret music that nobody knew about, and Merciful Fate and old Metallica, and we just thought we were in this cool club and everybody else was fully into, because the biggest kind of music at the time was like Motley Crue and Poison and all that stuff, and we were just like, so and there was a lot of power metal and even like Priest and stuff like that, and we just wanted it to be angry, and so I don't know, but we also loved Yes and Rush and Mahavishnu Orchestra and Zappa and stuff like that. We loved things that were well played musically, but we weren't able to play that well yet. So it's odd that that's what we were shooting for. And huge Rush fans, like our drummer and myself, just that was a daily diet of music in our life. And so if you have that as your sort of standard, and then you combine the anger of metal, I mean, it just accidentally happened. I mean, we definitely didn't think about it, and that's the greatest way things should come about. Where you're young and you're not listening to anybody else, and you're just kind of making the music that that sounds like your heroes, and our heroes just happen to be on many different avenues of music, anything from jazz to extreme Venom and stuff like that, back in the day, and punk rock was very influential on our overall attitude. So that's how it happened, and so we just kind of had mutual interests when we met each other, and that's how it got rolling.
Do you think your first album was definitely in When You're in Ravage was that aggressive, in your face, straightforward kind of death thrash style? Do you think you lost a lot of people who were just looking for that, and that was where their attention span, when you started throwing in samba and jazz rhythms and and the style changed to something you had to pay attention to, and maybe it took like 5 or 6 listens until you actually got the song.
No, I mean, I think that definitely hurt us in the beginning. I mean, I know it did because people would just be so confused and just especially when we played live and we had no one to play with live.
Yes.
We played with two bands. Our two major first tours were Candlemass and Cannibal Corpse. So we were fucking, we was just like, well, we were fighting every night to try to not confuse people. And
Yeah.
the thing about it, in the beginning, it used to be this like, we looked up a lot to Nasty Savage. They were an amazing band that really showed us all the way, and they really deserve so much more credit for the formation of the Tampa death metal scene. Even though they weren't a death metal band, they just carried themselves with such swagger and vigor, and it was just so good. And we just thought that was okay. We're allowed. We'll do what we want to do, and we'll mix all these things together. And there's just no one to play with back then for us. And we we're still always explaining ourselves. On top
Yeah.
of having the band name Atheist, and even Ravage. There was just a small handful of writers at magazines: Eula Garrett, Bori Voikryn, Monty Connor, Don Kay. Those guys were Bernard Doe, Dave Constable. Those were the first few guys that said, whatever you're doing is different. And it's really different. They kind of stuck with us, and they remain friends to this day. But yeah, I think we probably confused. I mean, there was many times where people would stand right in front of the stage, just like this, while we were playing, stand there the whole time. Just, so it was, and I think, by the time 1993 rolled around, not to jump into 93, but I think that everybody, other than myself, I mean, I was a little frustrated, but everybody had just been like, man, these people do not like this technical music, and so
Yeah.
and that's kind of where we know. I mean, that's where Steve went to college, and everybody else bailed out, and and I started moving into the Neurotica era, and then I jumped back to Elements, and that ended up being this amazing experience that that's a whole nother story. But yeah, we probably, to answer your question with a short answer, definitely. I don't even know that we made fans. I feel like we just never got them until later, until 15 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, people just immediately heard Atheist. It's like, they couldn't, everybody just really wanted to either, there really wasn't any mosh pits until punk rock, until Slayer and DRI kind of came together. And
Yep.
that's something that a lot of young people don't know, that was a really important convergence. And that changed heavy metal from just headbanging to moshing. And that was a a huge change. And DRI, Slayer, that kind of combination, when that happened, it kind of let everybody know that it was cool, because punk rock was they didn't really like long hairs that much,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure long hairs were all that fond of the punk rockers either, but we were. We had friends that were great punk rock friends, and but that we shared anger in music. I think punk rock and extreme metal, the early days and on into today, shares that pissiness, that anger. And but just finding, playing with Candlemass, which is the ultimate doom band. I love that fucking band, and I loved them before we went on tour with them, and they were incredible to us. And the fact that they brought us on tour was very courageous of them, because their fans were very like, what is
Yeah. Yeah.
every 10 seconds it was going into a new riff, so people were like, I can't even mosh, I can't even headbang to this. It's just, you're fucking constantly changing time signatures. And we were like, that's what we want to do. So, I mean, it wasn't until, the early 2000s before I started sort of recognizing people. Really, the younger generation is who brought this band back. I think a lot of older guys bailed out as well, and then they jumped back onto the ship later, But it was in 2006 when we went and played at Wacken in Germany, where tens of thousands of people. That was an amazing turn of events for us, because we realized that at the meet and greets there were no old guys; it was all young kids, and it was because of the internet. And they discovered
Yeah.
this music, and they found it, and to them it resonated, and they wanted to hear something other than just straight up knuckle dragging metal, where it's just you know, uh, where it's, what I mean, where it's violence for the sake of violence and gore, and we were never that, and we didn't even look that way either. So we had every arrow against us in the beginning. So that's why I'm so grateful in these times, to be able to have a career at this point, after everything we went through, is quite a story.
Yeah. When you formed Atheist in the 80s, did you imagine that the band would be so influential to any technical death metal band like around now? even.
No, I mean, not only that, I tell people often that I used to think, man, I wish I could write one song that somebody I don't know writes me a letter or send, or lets me know that they like that song. That used to be the most important thing. Like, not my friends, not my mom, not my uncle. You know what I mean? Like, I want to write something where nobody knows me and they hear and they go, yeah, I fucking love that. That was the first goal that I had as a songwriter, and in the beginning, it was only my bandmates. I would write lyrics to, like, I remember coming in with the lyrics for "Piece of Time," and Rand Berkey was our guitar player, was a very smart guy. He had a lot of ideas. He was an early, not a conspiracy theorist, but he had a lot of views on a lot of things, and I used to really kind of just write for those guys to try to impress them. Steve Flynn was a very smart guy, drummer, well read, great education. So I, with a 10th grade education and smoking a lot of pots and being just a kind of a long haired nobody, I really wanted to, in the beginning, impress them. And so once I got that confidence, it just kind of trickled out into to other people recognizing that, but they just didn't in the beginnings. It was hard, man. It was hard to watch everybody else do better, right out of the gate. But slow and steady wins the race, and we didn't win the race, but I mean, we're certainly in it in the 21st century, and it's and I'm super grateful for these times, to be able to go out and tour, play this music, and see people 16, even younger than 16, come to the shows. And that's crazy. As an artist, what more can you ask for? In closing on this, a lot of people are like, you've been playing music 30 years and you're not a millionaire. That's like, yeah, I am. I'm spiritually super wealthy. You know what I mean? I feel like you couldn't buy the experience that I've had. Like, I don't care how much money you have. You could not play in a club and have the singer for AC/DC come up and say, "Hey, son, you're fucking great. I want to fucking work with you." You know what I mean? Like, you don't get Slash calling you on the phone and saying, "Yeah, come to LA." And you know what I mean? Like, you can't buy that shit, no matter how much money you have. Not and have it be real, So I
Yeah.
always think, and then you add in all the amazing shows and the touring and the friendships and the just the travel, the travel alone is just, worth millions of dollars just in the relationships. And here I am, like, me and you spoke 30, how many years ago?
30,
35.
35. Yeah.
35 years ago. Think of that. I mean, and here we are, just effortlessly conversing again. And I love that music did that. Music
Yeah.
is the only reason, that we're still talking again, and so you got to love that.
Yeah, still a fan of the music, and I'm glad that, I mean, Eli and I started this podcast about a year and a half ago, and he started getting into the music I was into, and it like kind of brought a spark, and I'm glad I get to share what you did in the 90s with him now, like it's all new again.
Well, to have him actually be cool with it is, and my son is 8 right now. He could give 2 shits what my music sounds like. You know what I mean? So it's frustrating for me.
I knew we were
But yeah,
getting into
you're very
storms, so we
fortunate.
had,
So and
yeah,
that's going to stay with you, until your final days, and that's amazing. To have that. I hope that I get to do that. It's one of the downsides of being an older dad. Is that, man? I hope that I get to see all these things that you're getting to see. I hope I make it that long.
yeah. We were a couple years ago, it's 3 years ago, I started bringing Eli to shows, and we got to see bands I didn't think he'd ever see, like Sacred Reich and Nasty Savage and
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nocturnals. So we get to see all them, and we got lucky. I'm from the Northeast, but we moved to Tampa here, and I was like, well, if you love extreme music, this is where you want to live, right?
yeah.
That's where it all started.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
man, it was great back in the day too. It was like um I mean, think of it like Obituary, and like Morbid Angel, Atheist, Malevolent Creation, Cynic. Cannibal Corpse ended up being like, it was just this. I mean, the closest thing, obviously far less successful, but the closest thing I could compare it to is the Seattle. I mean, all the great bands that came out of Seattle in the '90s. Um, and that was another question that people would ask a lot, is like, what's going on down there? What's in the water? And it's just that's the way art moved. It moves in waves, and that wave crashed upon the Bay Area and Tampa, and Nasty Savage was really that band that that showed us how to do it. We were so young. I don't even know if some of us were allowed to be in the place where the show was, and just watching them do their thing. And Nasty Ronnie he was a king back then. I mean, those shows were so great, and we recognized also as atheists how much respect we had for them individually as musicians, especially the Dezo Bartha era. Dezo Bartha was this incredible bass player that they had after Fred hurt himself. And it really kind of, it changed. They had a lot of progressive nature to them. And later in life, I mean, I looked up to them so much. I can't believe I have friendships with both Ronnie and David and all those guys. So I am grateful at my age now to have friendships with them. But man, I saw those guys as superstars, and their musical, they were very daring, and so we would take that right back to our rehearsal place and try to write songs like that and try to be that, interesting. And so they were a huge part of our, moving forward musically.
Nice. And so as Atheist moved forward, you guys released Elements, and then you started. This is the second time I interviewed you. Is right when you were starting Neurotica as a side project.
Mm-hmm.
So was that like a top of mind, like, style change you wanted to do, like maybe extend your vocals or go into a different direction, or how did that come about?
Well, I just had this ability to sing, and I was like, well, but I would never do that, and within the confines of Atheist, and out of respect for the genre and the it just didn't feel like a color I should be using in that painting, and so I had all this built up other music in me, and it was frustrating at the end of Atheist. We definitely had a tough time and a tough breakup. I didn't want it to break up, but it did, so it moved me in that direction. But then I had to move back to the Atheist to do Elements. So I was already in the studio at the same place we recorded the Elements album, but I was doing an Neurotica album. And and that's when I met like River Phoenix and Joaquin Phoenix, and they were guys that also hung out at that studio, and so it was just, it's really cool. And I met Josh Greenbaum, who ended up being the drummer on the Elements record, and so just all that whole 2-year period where Steve left the band, went to college, I just kind of felt alone, and so obviously I kind of rebelled and thought, well, I'm going to do this other kind of music for a while, and I did it. And and worked really hard for like 8-9 years to get Neurotica to the level of getting signed. And one of the first things that happened was that meeting that I talked about, Brian Johnson just showing up in a tiny little club in Sarasota, Florida, and seeing us play, and then we ended up having him produce the record, and it was an incredible experience, and above ground as opposed to underground. So I mean, I thought that a lot of people had forgotten about Atheist. I mean, we went out with Neurotica on the 2002 Ozfest, and we signed with the WWE's brand new label, SmackDown Records. So it was a very high profile thing. So that was completely different than my underground roots, and but it was, it felt good. I mean, it made me just feel it's good to be versatile, as an artist. Music is, you don't want to listen to the same music all the time. What I mean? Because it's a certain music. The sadder a song is, the happier it makes me. Isn't that weird? So I seek out sad songs all the time. But I think everybody should have that sort of versatile palette for music. So yeah, that's when Neurotica started, and that was a whole journey in itself.
Yeah, I heard a couple interviews with you talking about some of the things in there, and it seemed like a wild time coming from Atheist, this underground band, and all of a sudden there's Vince McMahon, there's the Aussie tour, there's K-Tel Records at one point was involved, I believe.
Yeah.
What was that like, and like being exposed to like that, for lack of a better word, the whole rock star like outlook?
That was crazy. I mean, we especially turning on the radio, jumping in a car and turning on the radio, and the song comes on. That's unheard of for extreme metal. It'll never happen in our life ever. It will now on Sirius Radio, but but I mean, that was, it made my mom happy, which really meant a lot to me. It helped me reconnect with my father, because he was in Cincinnati, Ohio, and WEBN was the main station up in Cincinnati where I was born. And he owned a gym where people work out, and they were working out and they were listening to the radio, and that's how he heard about me again. Like, it had been like a 10-year period where we didn't talk, and that's how we reconnected. And so, music is cool that way, I mean, it kind of pulls different people together, and you never know who's listening, and so, that was just an experience that I think that I appreciated more because I came from the underground, what I mean? So I think I really, really appreciated the extra nice hotel room, the larger shows, playing for 10, 20,000 people a day at Ozfest. Because I mean, those crowds would show up at 6 a.m, and we didn't play till between 9:30 and 1:30. we alternated schedules, and what an incredible summer. I mean, System of a Down, Chevelle, Ozzy, and just, I mean, just the whole thing was just crazy for me, especially, and going to, 2.5 months of that, 22 buses, and, that camaraderie, and, that's something I had not experienced, that level of touring, and,
Yeah.
yeah, again, you just kind of put those things in your little spiritual bank account and you move forward, And then it
Yeah.
wasn't
Again,
until that was the first time, though, that I recognized that people remembered Atheist. So if you remember, we broke up in '93. This was 2002. Coming up on 10 years, and it was Jamie Josta from Hatebreed who actually rolled up on a golf cart. He said, "Hey, man, you used to play in a band called Atheist," and I was like, "How do you know about Atheist?" He's like, "No, I loved Atheist," and I was like, "Oh." And then another band called OTEP, their bass player, his name was Evil J, and he was like, "You were an Atheist?" He's like, "Oh." So I started kind of hearing. And I was like, that's cool, and because I literally covered my tattoo and everything. I just thought people just didn't like that band, what I mean? And it is what it is. And so I was sort of settled with the fact that I have to move on. And so that it was, it made it kind of extra special when in 2006 we were able to reissue all the records. Here we are, 20 years later, almost
yeah.
since the reformation of the band.
Yeah, crazy. Well, I'm very happy it's reformed. I wanted to go back to the whole Jim McMahon thing. Is there a connection between Florida, whether it be extreme metal or what you were doing with Neurotica, and the WWE? Because you did some intro songs, I guess, to some people. Because Nasty Ronnie talked a lot about his connection with wrestling, and I was like,
No,
is there?
quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. We showcased in New York for a bunch of record guys. We went out to the Viper Room in LA, Johnny Depp's place, and we showcased for 40 different um, people from different labels. And one of them was this guy, Benji Gordon. And he was the early A&R guy for Vince McMahon and SmackDown. Now, when I was a kid, I was into wrestling. Florida wrestling was very big. And I used to go to this place called Robarts Arena and see like Dusty Rhodes and Harley Race and like really old school Florida wrestling. And Gordon Soley was the announcer. And I was really,
Oh
really into
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But the WWF at that time, I haven't even become WWE yet. There was like right on the fringe of that happening. Wasn't on my radar at that point. Once I'd grown up, I kind of pulled away from wrestling. But I mean, I saw the amount of, 10 hours of television a week. I mean, they had all kinds of shows on MTV, and the reach was undeniable. And so the fact that we got a call from them, we were just really interested in that deal because you sign to a label and they've got 25 other bands. You just got to get in line and hope, there's a pecking order. But this was a brand new label, brand new situation. They don't need rock radio. They don't need anything. They've got television. Television changes everything. And yeah, we got to do the King of the Ring song, and just a lot of other ways, alternate marketing possibilities that just weren't available before. But so no, to answer that question, Florida wasn't, oddly enough, because Florida was definitely a mecca for wrestling. It didn't have anything to do with our situation.
Yeah. We're gonna move on here a little bit. Tell me about Velvet Revolver. You were very close to singing with Slash and Duff from Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, so 2002 on into early 2003, Neurotica breaks up. The guys in the band don't want to do it anymore. SmackDown Records folds. Linda McMahon, oddly, was the one who made that phone call to me to tell me that, they just didn't have, even though they didn't need rock radio and everything, they didn't have a business infrastructure to be able to be a record label. Because back then, people still bought CDs. There were still record stores. I know this will be like a foreign thing to you at 14. It's like the record stores used to be everything, man. I mean, they were just, and you had to have distribution for people to be able to buy your record. And if it's not in the store in a particular town, then how can anybody buy it? That was a big deal back then. And obviously, you know, Neurotica got a lot of distribution, a lot of attention. And so when the time came, when it folded, I tried to get another record deal, and I put together a new band, a new lineup, but it just didn't feel the same. And then so that dissipated, and literally I was reading blabbermouth.net. That was the early days of Blabbermouth, and just saw that post that Slash had made, and they had this thing called The Project. And Benji Gordon, the guy from SmackDown Records, remained my friend, and he lived in LA. And I was like, hey man, I would love to, get my tape to Slash. He said there are no real rock frontmen, and I was like, fuck that, and 100% that. And so I And then it dawned on me, Koch Records was a distributor for SmackDown stuff, and they gave us a publicist in the early days of the SmackDown deal, and her name was Lulu, and she used to be Slash's publicist. So I was like, "Brr," and I called her up, and before I could even get the whole sentence out, because it was a big deal when Slash was looking for a singer, everybody was like, oh, everybody tried out for that. I mean, a lot of famous guys and from already established bands, because that's a sweet gig, and I was like, and she was like, you'll be perfect. So she sent that record to Slash, and then he called me on the phone, and I didn't get his phone call the first time he called. I was in a bar, and I checked my voicemail, and it was him. And I was like, I came back to my table, and I was just like, you're not gonna believe who's on my voicemail right now. I was telling my friends, I was like,
Wild.
literally is on my voicemail right now. And so, yeah, long story short, I called him up, and he's like, yeah, I'll send you 3 songs, and just write some vocals and record them and send them back. So I did, and then I got a conference call from Duff and Slash saying, yeah, we've been through hundreds of singers and really enjoyed this Neurotica record. What happened to this band? He's like, me and Duff sat and listened to this whole record, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. And he said, what happened to the band? I said, yeah, I gave him the short story of it, and said, yeah, we broke up. So he's like, okay, well, can you get out to LA? And I was like, yeah. So I flew out to LA, and and that was just a bizarre experience for an underground metal guy, because again, you're talking about Los Angeles, you're talking about, Matt Sorum's picking me up, and I love the Cult. I loved Matt Sorum, you know what I mean? Like, it was just odd to jump in his truck and be like, hey, what's up? And then we roll to practice, and a Jag pulls up and Slash gets out, and it's like, you know what I mean? It's like all these things are happening, and I'm just kind of like, I don't have anybody to really share it with, because I don't want to let on that this is like blowing my fucking mind, because I'm really standing here with, my generation's Rolling Stones. You know what I mean? Like, Guns N' Roses is in my opinion, they are the Stones of our era, so I'm hanging with Keith and Mick, and you know what I mean? That's how I felt. Like, holy shit, I can't believe him. And so I got over that, and I went in, and we jammed, and it was just like jamming with anybody else, but it was funny though. I don't know if I told this story or not, but Slash, at one point before we started playing, he was like, hey, do you have any earplugs? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, no, we play kind of loud. And I was like, man, you have no idea where I come from, buddy. that wasn't even close to being loud. I mean, I practiced in a 10 by 10 warehouse with Atheist for many years. It was loud with my amp right there at my ear, So anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny, but I was like, no, I'll be all right, man. It'll be cool. And so I sang like the 3 songs for the audition, and they had people filming it and recording it. So I was a little overwhelmed at the end of that, and so I was like, I'm gonna go smoke a cigarette. And so I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and they gave them a moment to kind of talk to each other. And I'll never forget. I'm smoking a cigarette, and I look across the parking lot, and it's Duff, and he goes, I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And so I go over to him, I meet him in the parking lot. He's like, yeah. He's like, can you stay the weekend? Can you stay till Monday? And so I didn't have a whole lot of money, at that point. So I had to call Neurotica manager Doug Kay at that point and be like, hey, man, can you pay for the hotel for 2 more days so I could stay? And he was like, fuck yeah, I will. So, because we were both just blown away because, initially I called him. He was my manager at the time. And he was like, man, Kelly, he's in LA. All the killer young singers are out there, and you're, kind of pissing up a tree. And I was like, no, I'm not, And so when that happened and I finally got through and I made it that far, he was like, all right, hey, I got you. He took care of me on it. And so I stayed, and then I left LA pretty much with that gig. And then Slash's Snake Pit, which was his main band at that point, ran a story on the thing that said that I was going to be the guy. And so for like 48 hours, I was the guy. And then because Duff's wife knew Scott Weiland's wife, they found out that Weiland was going to be available, and you can't blame them. I mean, first of all, he's Scott Weiland. He's amazing. He's already sold 4 million records on his own.
Yeah,
it's a no-brainer. Do you go with the unknown guy in Florida, or do you go with the already platinum Scott Weiland, who's also a train wreck? And honestly, I think that had a lot more to do with it than maybe I'm talking out my ass, but they just seemed. And I have a lot of friends that have kicked heroin, that have been junkies and pulled out of it, but they always speak about it like it's the hottest girl they've ever been with, and it's the love of their life. I mean, even if they're clean and sober, and in the conversations that I had, and in the lunch that we had together, that's how it felt for them. Like, yeah, they were clean and they were getting through it, but they're not happy about it. And so they were kind of, I think, probably lived a little vicariously through Weiland
Mm.
in the beginning of that band. And I could just tell, and you can't blame them. I mean, that, they're coming from the wild, I mean, one of the wildest bands to ever exist, Guns N' Roses. The choice between me and Scott Weiland was probably the right one for them. So, because I was never going to be that junkie guy, I was never going to, be the guy that glorifies all that. I smoke weed and I have a couple drinks, and that's pretty much my limit.
Yeah. And then, as you said earlier, I mean, those are the kind of things people are saying, well, you've been doing music this time, but you're not a millionaire. Those memories, I think you can't put money on, right? Those
And a lot of what I'm
experiences.
saying right now is also reading between the lines as a guy who's thought about it for a number of years. So, if Slash and Duff read this, or hear this, I apologize. That was just my take, and I'm entitled to my take of how it went down. Slash wrote about it in his book, but he gave me like one sentence. But it was great to be in the book. It's great. I know they had auditioned a lot of singers. At the end of it, like I've told a lot of my friends, like I just felt like I pulled a really fast one on one of the greatest rock bands ever. I was almost a fucking singer as a death metal guy. That's pretty funny.
That's greatness. Yeah.
Could almost make it, like I don't know, like an interesting, short movie about it, because it's like, it's not like Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg and all that. But I mean, it's not unlike that in a way, because I mean, it's Guns N' Roses, I mean, they were not a metal band. They were just a mainstream, as big as a band can be. So, it was so cool though. And then I hope I get to see those guys again before we all pass. But it was a cool thing. And, but I also knew that at the time, after that happened, and I haven't really spoke this much, but there was a show called Rockstar Supernova. Do you remember that show?
No.
It was on, it was the same guy that did Survivor. It was on network television. And it was Tommy Lee and Gilby Clarke and Jason Newsted.
I do remember. Yeah.
They were looking for a singer. And so Benji Gordon, the same guy that helped me with the Slash thing, he's like, Gilby Clarke is a huge Neurotica fan. And I was like, really? I was like, that's crazy. And he was like, you should audition. And I was like, man, I don't want to come on out there and stand in a cattle call line. He's like, no. You can skip the cattle call and get right in. Sure as shit. Off I go. And I go in. And here's the funny part. So I 2 days before that situation, I'm playing in this band called Big Machine of songs that Brian Johnson wrote. A lot of people don't know about this band. When there was a 7-year hiatus when Brian and AC/DC weren't working, but we were hanging out a lot, and we would go to his house and just see him a lot. And he was frustrated, so he wrote these 7 songs and wanted me to sing on the demo because he wasn't allowed to. And so it became this band called Big Machine, which ironically ended up being his Velvet Revolver song. Has no connection, but just oddly, Big Machine ended up being the name of this band. And so I play in the show, and I take the microphone 2 days from going to LA to audition for this network television thing that I've got I've got an inside route to, and I knock my front tooth out.
No.
Which is the worst thing you could do as a singer, So now I call the producers and I'm like, can I send some video in, of me singing, and can I audition that way? They were like, no, you have to come out here. We're filming this, and it's like it's a TV show. And I was like, oh. So off I go to LA, missing my front tooth.
Oh shit.
And so I go to to audition. Fucking Jeff Scott Soto is auditioning the same day. Do you know who that is?
No.
Jeff Scott Soto? Holy shit. Yeah, he's just like this guy. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was the voice for Mark Wahlberg in the movie Rockstar. He's just this guy. He's a great singer. He's still around today, still doing great things. Phenomenal singer. And I'm watching all these LA singers, and they're doing cover songs. And I'm out there, I'm doing a Neurotica song. And so I get up there and I do a Neurotica song, and it's Ride of Your Life, this song called Ride of Your Life. And it's got this middle part that's like really fast, like pick this, oh my God. And so Jason Newsted loved it. So I do it. I go back to Benji Gordon's apartment, waiting for the call back. And I get the call back. And then I go back the next day, and Jeff Scott Soto has been eliminated. And I'm still there. And I'm like,
wow.
You gotta be kidding me, man. I'm missing my front tooth. How is this possible? So I literally, and then Jason comes over to me, which I really didn't want to happen. And so now I'm just, you can imagine how you feel like, it's Jason Newsted, and he was like, yeah, what song is that you play? I was like, yeah, it's our song, it was our band Neurotica, and I'm just trying so hard. And I had to explain to him, I was like, hey man, just here's what happened. And I was like, I just literally knocked my tooth out 2 nights ago at a show. And he was like, oh, just I would have never noticed, and I was like, ah. So anyway, I did that. And then I made it to, I left LA, made it to the third callback. And then they got down to the final like 40. And I started getting scared because I was like, I was already in talks about getting Atheist reformed, and we were going to put the records back out, and there was all this opportunity to do that. So I thought, man, that's not going to sit well with atheist people. If I end up on a network television show singing for Tommy Lee and Jason Newsted and Gilly Clark, I'm going to lose my metal cred card immediately. You know what I mean? So I kind of didn't want to get it, but thankfully I didn't. And once it got down to below 40, I got eliminated. And watching the show afterwards, I'm so glad that I didn't have to go on that show, because it was fucking stupid. And nothing ever became of it. And it was just this guy, Lucas, won, and he was an imposter. He was like a fake LA kid, and just, I don't know, and I don't even think he's alive now. I think he's dead. I could be wrong, but anyway, that's how Atheist started again. And that's crazy that I was 20 years ago.
Yeah. Do you still have that? So Atheist came back somewhat at that point. Talk to me a little bit about the Atheist journey from that point and how Till the Dirt came about.
Well, it was a huge time period. And then the beginning of Atheist coming out, again, it was, I started a record label myself, took the 3 records that we had at that time, and got with Relapse, and they did a fantastic job of remastering, because we didn't have the actual reel-to-reel tapes of all those albums. And so we were able to remaster them, but we weren't able to remix or touch anything up. But they did, new CD covers and booklets and everything. A guy named Gordon Conrad, who was just this amazing fan and also very smart businessman, he really helped me put that together in 2000, like late 2005, early 2006. And so once the albums were reissued again, because they were unavailable for well over a decade, all those young people came in and bought that shit, and it just started a new fire. And it was all new and fresh and interesting. And so then we got an agent, and to see, I don't know, maybe we could play some shows. And then Wacken was the first show we got offered, which was, the cream of the crop of metal festivals, and then Hellfest, and then so forth and so on. So for about 3 years, we just kind of played shows when we felt like it, and played festivals, and kind of, Steve Flynn again was not in a position. He had a corporate job. He wasn't in a position to tour. I'm still, I owned a head shop at that point, so I could leave, and I owned a tattoo shop as well, so I could, I was still in the music business, and Steve was not. So it was a little frustrating, and we were offered a lot of really great things. We were offered a Dillinger Escape Plan Deftones tour, 8 weeks in the U.S., and we had to turn it down, which would have been monumental for Atheist at that point.
Yeah.
What a tour, man. And that was a personal ask from the Dillinger guys. So that was kind of, I started slowly moving towards the fact that, well, this, we're not going to be able to, unless we're able to get out and tour. So I got with Steve, and I talked to him and said, please, man, listen, I just want to put a new lineup together to go out and honor this music. And so that's what we did. And then, he worked with me on it in the beginning, and, gave me his blessing. And so that's how it's kind of unraveled since then. And the current lineup I have is just, man, they're remarkable. I love them so much, and I hope they stay with me till we're done. But it's but when COVID happened, how that was. I mean, so what were you, like 8? You were maybe like 7 or 8.
Yeah,
when COVID
like
happened? Yeah. So what do you remember about that? That must have been weird for you as well, huh? You had to do homeschooling on the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, nightmare.
Yeah. It's quite the thing.
So for me, musically, I got a little home studio set up on my laptop and found a way to be able to record guitar stuff. And then just by default, because I was home with my little boy was 4 years old at that time. He was like 3 going on 4. And my wife was working as a frontline sort of worker at that point at Publix. And so she would go to work at like 7 o'clock and work until 3 in the morning. I would start a song at like 7 o'clock. And I didn't really have anything I was just kind of having fun with the fact that I could record such high quality on a laptop. I was an old guy going, holy shit, you used to have to go in a studio and to be able to record all this stuff. And I can record a guitar sound like that. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Plugins and stuff like that. I was using plugins like the STL Tone Hub shit. And my friend Mark Lewis, who's a producer, does Job for Cowboy, he's an amazing. So he had a set of sounds on this thing, STL, and he's like, I'll send it to you. And that's literally what spawned this creativity out of me. And I wrote like over 25 songs in like a 6-week period. And but they weren't Atheist songs and they weren't Neurotica and I didn't know what the hell they were. And so I sent them around to my friends in the business that I knew would tell me the truth. And yeah, and it's just materialized from there. And then I got in touch with Scott Burns, and the same thing happened. I hadn't talked to him in years and years. I was like, hey man, I have this music, and he was kind of like, oh gosh, I mean, like, because he's so brutally honest that he didn't want to ruin the new rekindled friendship by telling me my
Yeah.
music sucks. And so that's the story he tells anyway. And then and he heard the demos and he was like, wow, this is really different. And it was, and for better or for worse, it was a very unique band. It was a combination of my love of 90s Seattle grungy kind of stoner rock, Caius, shit like that, mixed with extreme shit. I'd never done, there's not any blast beats on an Atheist record. So I had, all this, and then I had this layered vocal over the top of it. Sometimes a scream, but sometimes a clean vocal, but not like your typical clean. So it was just honest. You know what I mean? I wasn't trying to do anything. I just accidentally tripped, fell, and wrote 25 songs. And I did all the drums and everything. And, and then I would do them each night. So I would finish the song usually by that night or the next night tops. So I never spend more than a day and a half on any of the songs that ended up on the record. And then in the middle of doing all that, Jeff Loomis one night, he texted me and I was like, hey man, will you do a solo on one of my songs? And he was like, yeah. So I sent him the files, and he's 2 days later sent me a solo back, and I was like, holy fuck. And Jeff Loomis is amazing. For those who don't know, he's, just probably one of our genre's greatest guitar players. So it was just kind of cool that he did that. And then slowly but surely I had a bunch of other guests. I had Steve DiGiorgio play on the title track, and it became this really fun thing. Scott Burns is involved, Monty Connor and Nuclear Blast is involved, and it was kind of all my old comrades, from Atheist, kind of supporting this new thing that I was doing. It was great, man. I'm super proud of that record, but I think it's like a lot of the music that I've been involved in, it just takes people like 10 years to kind of absorb it, because it's always
Yeah.
just full of weird shit that you're not supposed to do. With Atheist, you're not supposed to mix jazz and extreme metal. With Till the Dirt, you're not supposed to mix, you know, Alice in Chains type vocals with blast beats. You're not supposed to do that. And so everybody goes,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know if I like that or not, but I think that, 5 or so years down the line, I hope people will go back and listen to that record. And because it came out in 2003. So hopefully by 2010, everyone will get it and be like, hey, that was a good record. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
I guess you touched on this with the whole recording on computers and stuff, but what do you think the biggest differences are recording in the 90s and the 80s and now are?
The same difference as it is going to Blockbuster Video and then getting something on Netflix. I mean, it couldn't be more different. The recording process back then was $100 an hour minimum, and you had to have them, you know, there's a lot of things about the old days that I really love. But the convenience and the money you can save with the way modern recording is done. The downside of it is the art suffers, because, what you're listening to on a record most of the time isn't real. Those aren't real performances. Those are, and it started with Metallica, and Lars Ulrich. They started piecing together drum parts. Like every Atheist album, every drum track that you hear is a live take. We may have had to play that song 7 times in a row to get that take, but then, we were playing along with that, and they wouldn't record the guitar and the bass. Those were scratch tracks. They were just recording the drums. And so we would finally get a drum track that we want, and then we would track to that, and then make the song from there. So there's a charm to that I think a lot of your generation doesn't quite understand, but their ears understand it. And I think that's why kids your age are going back to old metal. Like, wait a minute, this shit sounds different. The reason it sounds different is because it's not to a click track, so it's
Yeah.
moving. It's a living organism. When you're listening to a song and it's speeding up and slowing down, that's the way music is supposed to be. It's supposed to breathe. And the convenience of modern recording has lent itself to, making it more affordable for anybody to make a high quality recording. But, it's not necessarily it's not a real performance, on when you listen to old Rush and Sabbath and all that shit. I mean, you're getting performances, that are once in a lifetime performances, that only happen that way. I say this often these days when we play Atheist songs. I've even said on stage a couple times, like, we'll only play this song this way this night. Tomorrow night, it'll be a different version of the song, whether we like it or not. You never play it. It's like a fingerprint, you know? And I like being involved in fingerprints as opposed to a, you know what I mean, a scenario where it's very structured and everything's got to be right in this little time frame. And I don't know, you know what I mean? Yeah, I think there's a charm to that as well for convenience and for you know, for everybody to be able to participate because it created a lot of opportunity for musicians that probably wouldn't be musicians if they had to be on stage. A lot of kids sit on the edge of their bed, record amazing shit, but never get on stage. You know what I mean? And I think it's important to be a performer. You know, music is made to perform. And so I come from that school. So a lot of differences. You know, I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, but things I love about modern recording are the guitar sounds. Like I can work on a track one night. I can actually go back to something I did 6 months ago and lay a new guitar part. I don't have to worry about the mics and how they were placed and whether I'm getting the exact same guitar sound or not. You couldn't do that back then. Once you tore down your mics and your amps and all that, that was it. You know, that was you'll never get that sound again. You'll never get that exact sound again. And but you can duplicate things with modern sort of digital recording. And you know, it came in handy for me being by myself. I didn't have a bass player or anybody else to fuck with. I was just making all the decisions myself, and it was fun. I didn't have to ask anybody else's opinion, and it was just it was liberating, kind of, you know, to just make a song. And if I wake up the next morning and listen to it, and it's shitty, then shame on me. You know, I don't have to hear it from four other people. But I just love the quality of recording. That's the greatest thing that you guys have at your disposal is the quality of recording that you can make right on your laptop, jump in your car and play it, and it sounds incredible. That's what blew Scott Burns away because I told him, he's like, "How are you making these songs?" And I was like, "I'm fucking literally doing it on my laptop, bro. Like I have this shitty little laptop, and I have this, you know, the studio set up, and I just roll tracks, man. And I'm stacking, you know, 4 tracks of guitars, and I only had a 3-string bass at that time, and he actually bought me. Because I'm left-handed. Somebody loaned me their bass, and it was like a 3-string bass. You know, it didn't have a 4-string, but I didn't really care, and it was upside down. So that's how I was laying down my early bass tracks because it was COVID and I couldn't. Everything was closed. So he sends me. Bought me a left-handed bass, a 5-string, sent it to me. It shows up on my doorstep with some Jaeger. And he's like, "Just keep writing, Scott Burns."
Nice.
He's like, "Keep writing, keep writing." And so he became really involved in it and ended up, you know, producing it with me. And it was just a lot of fun. It was exciting, you know, and you know, when you're kind of doing something new. And I really thought that, you know, people would, you know, be sort of more into it. But you know, the reviews were mixed, you know, and I was used to, you know, used to that. I should have known that anytime you try to, you know, sort of do something different, you know, there's always going to be a constituency of people that are like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't like
Oh,
it.
we're glad you're out there making different music. I mean, it's been a
Thanks,
constant
man.
in my whole life. We're always digging at stuff. And you said so many things that we could go down rabbit holes with modern verse
Yeah, I
music
apologize. I'm
back in the
excited.
80s. No, it's fine. That's good. So the part about playing live out, Eli plays guitar, but he also goes to School of Rock. So they learn to play out on stage because I thought that was maybe the most important thing about being a musician is working with others in a live environment. And we talk a lot about on this podcast and just in general, listening to music. The thing I love most about a lot of music is you can hear the drums. The drums sound like drums. So many modern bands, the drums are just click, 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 click. You can't hear the cymbals. You don't know what toms they're hitting.
It's
So
all triggered
that's,
and gated, and you
yeah,
know, a snare can't possibly sound like a real snare, like in a Zeppelin song. When you hear a snare, when you hear John Bonham hit a snare, that's a fucking snare. You know, and,
yeah,
and so when you're playing at 280 beats per minute, you can't have a drum resonate. Drums were made to resonate. So you know, blast beats are just this, you know, you're essentially just pop, 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 pop. You can't have any resonation. So
yeah,
you know, it works within the realm of, you know, if that's the kind of music you love, but you can't just go from that setup and play a rock song or a moderate metal song or, you know, or something like that. So you know, it's just a matter of preference, I guess, you know, and I'm not trying to be a hater I love, you know, the whole Till the Dirt record was made with a click, made to a click, made with all the modern conveniences because it had to be because I didn't have anybody else.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not trying to be a hypocrite. I'm just kind of pointing out the things that having done it both ways, I can see, you know, ups and downs on either side. But I think if you can afford it and you can get in the situation where you record to tape and you commit to performances, because these days somebody can play through 8 measures of a guitar part and know, well, I got the first 4 good, just chop it and cut it and copy and paste it. Then off it goes, you know what I mean? And he didn't really fucking play it. He didn't really
Yeah.
play it. You played it 4 times and then you copied and pasted it through the whole song. And so it ends up sounding, and usually, in all the old records that we all love, Judas Priest, all that, you're playing the same riff. If you're playing a verse and you've got the same guitar riff 3 times and 3 verses in the song, each time you're playing it is a little bit different. And that's kind of what your ear recognizes and loves. It's like, oh, this is great. This is great. And I think that's what a lot of younger kids are going back and listening to those old records going, why is this pleasing me so much?
Yeah.
Because it's freer, it's less confined. And, I think there's something to be said about that, and I think that a lot of, even Korn's making their current record right now, old school. They're doing right to tape. No fixing, no digital bullshit. They're going to do it old school, and it'll be interesting to hear how it sounds because, mistakes and flaws are kind of the greatest things about music. I think that's, does that make any sense? You know what I mean? Like flaws,
Yeah.
and mistakes. There's sometimes, playing guitar. Some of the greatest things you ever write are happy accidents. Like, oh shit, I never would have wrote that and known, but I accidentally, wrote this riff this way, and those accidents are necessary. But
Yeah.
you commit yourself to a time structure, and it's got to be this. I got to fit it in this little box, and I don't know. So there's perks to both.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any bands now that you're listening to that are doing it like that way? Do you think are being creative and pushing boundaries like Atheist did?
Oh, yeah. I think, what's happening is I think they're coming up with new ways of being challenging within the digital realm. You know what I mean? And they're kind of, creating some real sonic, soundscapes that sound tremendous. You know what I mean? You listen to bands like, Slaughter to Prevail, Lorna Shore, bands like that are using modern production techniques, but they're just creating these really fucking heavy moments, you know what I mean? And a lot of my old school friends will kind of wrinkle their nose at all that shit. And I have love for all of that. It's not something I listen to. I think I think it's just not the same, but I can appreciate what they're trying to do. And I think that as they get older and write more songs, that they're going to find themselves borrowing a little bit from the past and using some from the
Mm.
future. It's just, that's my biggest thing, is also the bass drums on a drum set these days. It drives me crazy with that clicky trigger sound. It's just, that's not a bass drum. You can
Yeah.
still use real drum sound and still get that click. And Rain and Blood, Dave Lombardo, when you hear that break in Angel of Death, that classic double bass break,
Yep.
those are real drums. Your feet do not hit the same each time ever in your life. So a double bass shouldn't be, that sounds like your digital stereo is stuck. You know what I mean? It's like, that doesn't have the same, it doesn't resonate the same way with your heart as when you listen to that double bass breakdown in Angel of Death, where you can hear the bass drums don't quite sound exactly the same, but holy fuck, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I hope that the youth of today, and I think they already are going back and ingesting the same things that we grew up with and applying that to their modern, amazing, creations of today. The thing that's like Gojira, they're not a new band, but they're new. They're among the leaders of newer bands. They've been around for a minute now, so I maybe it's a wrong example, but the gated guitar sounds, to be able to really get tight breaks, those kinds of things I appreciate. I love a tight break, in something. I don't want to hear string noise, or I don't want to hear fret noise. But if something goes, I want it to go and not being,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that extra little sound. So I really like that. And for editing songs, I mean, we spent one entire day on Piece of Time, and we didn't have a huge budget. One entire day going through each, because when you have microphones on drums and you hit a cymbal, the cymbals leak into the tom mic. So when you go to turn the toms up, the cymbals get louder, and you're like, fuck, I don't want more cymbals. So there was no isolation. And so you had
Yeah.
to go through each drum roll and cut and cut that out. And it took 12 and a half hours of our budget
Yeah.
just cleaning drums, which would have took 15 minutes today. So,
Yeah.
so I really love those kinds of things, but, we were editing real performances. So that's what I would want people to do. Record real drums, then go back and edit from there, but at least get yourself a real take, that's got a
Yeah.
feel of a real performance. And playing live is very important, I think, and granted, there's studio guys, Steely Dan, bands like that, tremendous respect for Steely Dan. They didn't play a lot live, but I think it's important, to see how your music connects to people, and in that sort of uncomfortable situation, and that's what playing live really is. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Atheist is seemingly back and seeing also just bigger than ever. I see Atheist all over social media. I see the band is touring Europe. Are there any new plans for music for the band?
Oh yeah, yeah. We have 7 new songs written right now. We're in a bit of a contract dispute with a Polish label that we've been battling for the last few years, and we're trying to come to terms with that. As soon as we do, we're ready to hit the studio. The lineup of guys that I have now, tremendous writers, tremendous love for the catalog of Atheist, and anybody that comes to see us play live, well, this is the best the band has ever sounded. I mean, short of the old days, and in many ways, the consistency level of the way the songs are being played now are just amazing. And so to translate that to new music, the 7 that we have done, and we've got a whole lot. We really just got to sit down for a couple of weeks, and we'd have the rest of the record written. Man, I can't be, it sounds different. Every Atheist record sounds different, and
Yeah.
this one definitely sounds different as well. But a lot more of, leaning back into the dominant bass aspect of Atheist was a very important thing. And on Jupiter, we didn't really, we didn't try to pull away from it. I just really wanted to have a heavier guitar presence on Jupiter. A lot of people are like, oh, the bass isn't loud enough. I'm like, we did that already. Told that joke already. I wanted to make a different record that was a little thicker, a little more, a little less fancy, and a little more raw. And if you go back and listen to Jupiter, I mean, there's a ton of technicality on the record and a ton of really great bass lines. They're just not as loud and as dominant as they were on the 3 previous records. So but on this one, just by default, I mean, our bass player that we have now, Yoav, is just a tremendous talent, and has incredible attack, and it lends itself to writing for that. I mean, so to create breaks and where it's just a bass and drums, and our new drummer is a powerhouse. Just a guy we've never had this kind of power. It's literally like when we're talking about Bonham, he plays a lot like John Bonham. He fucking hits the drums like so hard, and that. You could set anybody at John Bonham's drum set and they won't sound like John Bonham.
Yeah.
I mean, the drum set, no matter how nice it is, it's all about how hard you're hitting that. Drums were meant to be hit, and he hits very hard, but he has an incredible technical prowess that lends itself to this amazing new thing. That's how it feels for me as a writer. So I'm excited just to have all these, as I call them, paintbrushes, all these different paintbrushes and all these new colors that I get to play with as a songwriter, and hey, try this. Can you do that? And anything, they can do anything. And plus the stuff that they write is incredible. It's just stuff that I wouldn't write, but fits into my, to my world. And then, so we have a great time. I mean, I myself tracked 4 hours of guitar riffs on Google Drive, and we all have our Google Drives, and we listen to each other's stuff because we live in different states. And then when we were in Australia recently, we got a rehearsal studio and we wrote a song there. And then in between, in our American tour, in between a couple of festival shows, we wrote a song in Milwaukee. And so we've been working, and having a lot of fun. Definitely new music. Hopefully in early 2026 to mid 2026.
Shit, man, that's probably the most exciting news we've heard in a long time. New Atheist is unreal, unreal. So we've kept you for over an hour here. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Any last words or leaving words or?
No, listen, just thank you both. You're on opposite ends of the spectrum of the luck that I've had to be involved in this band, and it's refreshing and fun to be able to have this kind of dual conversation, and just have anybody really care as much as they do to want to have the conversation. It's fun for me. It brings up old memories and things that I haven't thought about in a while, and so I enjoy talking about metal, especially with people that actually give a shit. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Out to Europe September 4th. So anybody in Europe, we start in Poland September 4th with our friends in Origin, and a bunch of other bands are on the tour. It's going to be great. So it's our first headlining tour of Europe. So hope to see everybody out there. Get your tickets.
Yeah, and we'll post all that on our social media as well, so people know. We see it up on Facebook and all over the place. So
best of luck with you. You like playing guitar? I look forward to buying your record someday.
Thank you.
I mean that. So I look forward to buying your record. That'll be great. And where you guys are up to, so we'll do a Tampa show. Maybe I'll see you out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
hook me up,
last time you guys came to Orlando, I think,
Yeah,
and
the
those
last
are
2
all,
times.
yeah, those are all 18 and over shows, so we couldn't get Eli
That's
in.
hard.
So
That's hard. I
yeah,
know. And I'm definitely I'm trying to put something together a little closer that an all ages situation. But sometimes it's not. It's out of our control. But
yeah.
hopefully we'll see you at a show and hit me up ahead of time so you can be my guest and come out. We can have a personal chat.
That's awesome.
And hopefully by
Yeah.
then you can bring me your new record.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Kelly.
guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you.